What happened again? I was underwater again. Welcome everyone to SolidWorks Live Design. You might notice that there are definitely some different visual treatments there. So deep dive, right? What is deep dive? Well, we got together as a tech marketing team here at SolidWorks, and we decided that we wanted to dedicate this season specifically to deep dive topics on SolidWorks, which means basically a topic that we really wanted to go really deeply into. And a topic that is near and dear to our hearts, our interests. So it isn't so much, hey, what is what is everyone demanding? Whether it's an influencer, who, we have many influencers here on Live Design, or one of us here at SolidWorks hosting an episode, just a topic that's near and dear to your heart that you really want to nerd out on. So once again, welcome. My name is Sean O'Neill, and I'm privileged here to be delivering the first deep dive of this season on workspace customizations. Now, in terms of how I've structured this presentation, I have a little bit of an agenda here that we can show you. You'll see that it's an 8-part agenda. So we kind of go through the gamut of different types of workspace customizations or explorations, as I might say. So we'll go with system options and settings, different ways to customize your system. And as we go here, you'll see there is some questionable overlap in terms of topic descriptions. So definitely bear with me here. But I hope that you're excited based on the view of these, because my aim here, aside from giving you, 50 odd ways to customize or leverage your workspace within SolidWorks, my aim was to give a little bit of everything for everyone. So, whether you're a beginner or you've been using SolidWorks for quite some time, I think today you will pick up some really great tips. If you are watching today, watching presently, welcome once again. Be sure to leverage the YouTube chat if you have a comment like, hey, I learned something today. I did not know that we could do that in the software. Or, hey, Sean, what if we check this box instead? Or what if we don't check it? What happens? Just ask me in the chat, and we'd be happy to explore it together. So we are expected here to go for about an hour, maybe more. Once again, ask any questions you have. We're here to learn from and explore together here on Live Design with this special deep dive episode. All right, so once again, let's get started here with system options and settings. So within this topic area, once again, this is the first of 8 topic areas that I wish to explore. We're going to go through a little bit of a mixture of different areas here, kind of keep you on your toes. So assigning template locations, error handling, feature naming automation, dismissed message review, and then registry info FAQ. A few of these are areas where maybe we don't have a video, maybe we don't have a short or a vignette on it. And I wanted to maybe explore it just because I thought it was an area of interest for anyone that's looking to customize their workspace. All right, so first off, let's explore together. So I'll switch over to SolidWorks here in just a moment. Assigning template locations, error handling options, as well as feature naming automation. All right, so let's switch over to our favorite app, SolidWorks. All right, so I'm at SolidWorks here, 2025. FD, as we learned yesterday on Delivery Day, episode 1, where we went over all the new features within Functional Delivery 1, FD1 of SolidWorks 2025. All right, so the first topic we're going over is assigning template locations. Now, when you think about customizing SolidWorks, many of you might know this already, but some of you might not. When you go to Control N is the shortcut, or if you just go to the little dog-eared piece of paper to go to New, you'll be greeted by this very generic looking icon-rich template selection framework. If we select on Advanced, we get our templates in terms of files. Now, you'll probably want to customize your templates in terms of customizing the units, the drafting standard, and so forth. So saving templates is always a good idea. And you'll notice each of these templates, as I hover over them, they have a specific file location. Now, how do I customize that location? Now, if you're working at a company with more than one user, you'll probably want to customize this location in an area that is universally accessible. But if you go up to your options and then you go down to file locations, document templates is exactly where you want to go. So I'll zoom in right there. So document templates. Now, we added this area, edit all, a few years back, and it is actually one of my favorite areas within options, mainly because, as you can see, you can go through this drop down and kind of pick on, for example, whole table templates and get the location there defined by the system. But if you go back, let's say to, once again, document templates. So where are you there? Document templates. All the way at the top. Yeah, so that's the one that document templates and reference documents are not alphabetized. So we're going to edit all. So I really like this area because you can just basically jump right in and you can browse to a location, but you can also just edit the text. So if you have a location that you've gotten through the Windows File Explorer, you can just copy that out of the kind of address bar there in the Windows File Explorer and just paste it right in here. So that's a really easy way to edit. Or if, for example, you find that SOLIDWORKS may be using old pathways from an old installation, which we'll talk about in a moment with registry editing. You can just do a simple find replace here and replace, say, the year. If you're finding, hey, my system has, it's not SOLIDWORKS Corp, it's SOLIDWORKS 2025 for all these locations. You can find replace Corp for 2025. Now, I will say be careful with that. But once again, this edit all button is a favorite of mine in terms of workspace definition and customization for really its ease of use and ease of access and ease of overview, right? I can just scroll down all these and see them all in one shot. So very good. Okay, so I wanted to cover templates first of all, because really I think whenever anyone's using SOLIDWORKS, that's kind of a big space that you have to customize or at least be aware of. The next area I want to cover is error handling. Now, errors are not something that necessarily we want to be running into, but surely when we do run into errors, we want to know that they have occurred so that we can fix them. A lot of people don't know, actually, there are different options in terms of what SOLIDWORKS identifies as an error. So this is one I wanted to showcase here. So specifically this one. So this is, I believe, the out-of-the-box checkbox status of this, this particular option, treat missing mate references as errors. I would argue that you might want to have this checked on. The reason is because you might want to make it so that SOLIDWORKS is essentially identifying that if something is missing, that it could be an error. It could be something that is literally very wrong. So not a warning necessarily, but an error. So as someone that whenever I see the yellow, I kind of identify it more so as a red error, whether it's in Sketch or in Mates. I usually will try to check this on so that it's equally identified as such, right? If a reference is missing, the definition of the product might be wrong. So I usually will sort of defer to checking this on. But you'll notice, aside from all of that, there are a lot of options here that I would recommend looking through. I would also say that if you've been updating SOLIDWORKS over and over and over again, sometimes it's nice just to go through these and actually review areas where you might have changed a setting and you haven't looked at it in years, right? Or many months, such as this hide graphics card and driver notifications. Say you're getting a lot, and then you're like, I don't want to see it anymore. I want to hide them. Well, if you hide them and then your graphics card goes out of date or your driver goes out of date and then you start getting crashing issues or whatever it is, this could be kind of like a hidden cause. So I do recommend looking through options like these, especially with errors and warnings and dismiss messages for sure, which we'll cover a little bit later in the presentation for that very reason. Okay. All right. So the next area I want to look at is feature naming automation. So within the feature manager, and we'll cover a lot of these areas kind of as we go here. But within the feature manager area of system options, which I'm in right now, feature manager, there are quite a few different options you may want to take advantage of. One that is not turned on and is not the topic right now of what I'm reviewing is arrow key navigation, which essentially means that if you select a feature or a component in the feature manager tree, you can actually select your arrow keys up and down. And what that allows you to do is to explore the tree using your arrow keys. So just a little bit of a bonus tip there. Primarily, though, within the context of this specific area of workspace customization that I intended to go into, name feature on creation is an area that you might want to check on. All right, so let's see what happens if I check this feature on here. So name feature on creation. So I'll go ahead. I'll just go with a very standard template here. Okay. Then I'll select the front plane. Very simple. Just do a sketch just for the demonstration. So a little hockey puck here. Okay, go ahead. Features, boss extrude, arbitrary depth. Then you'll notice right where my cursor is, it's actually asking me to name the feature. So by default, it will go with boss extrude 1, but what I can do here is I can name it. So if I'm literally making a hockey puck, I'll just say hockey puck base, right? That not only makes it, whether you're coding or modeling, that only makes it so that, you know, when you go back to your parts, it's a lot easier to understand what the design intent was of the part, but it also makes it so that in the future if someone else is editing it, especially if you're in a collaborative environment, that you're able to understand what the other modeler was doing. Now, it's really easy to maybe call them, on the phone and say, hey, how did you model this part? What was the design intent here? However, we know people leave jobs all the time, as well as, maybe it's a vendor part, right? So I definitely recommend, if your practice permits it, to consider turning on that option so that you are reminded readily to name your features as you go. Cool. All right. So there we go. So that was my quick demo of a few different areas of the interface. Now, if we look forward here, we're going to go through a few others in terms of system options. I'll kind of narrate as we go. So in this area, what we're looking at are dismiss messages. I mentioned that just a moment ago. Now, within dismiss messages, what you can see is kind of right under the messages, errors, and warnings. You'll see here that we added an enhancement to where just a few years back, you can hover over enhancements that are more or less truncated. So you can see the full view of the message. And if you check them and then say, OK, essentially what you're doing is you're reintroducing them into the interface when they naturally occur. So you'll see if I go back to dismiss messages after checking them and then saying, OK, they are reintroduced. Now, there are a lot of cases where, and I do this in software packages all the time, right, that I might not want to see messages. Again, maybe it's a font that SOLIDWORKS can't find, or, it's you saw a few appearance related ones. Now, that can be OK, right, in a certain case where you're like, hey, I don't care about the font in this assembly. It does not matter to me. However, maybe there's a font that's used for a deboss or some sort of extrusion on a part or a unique labeling where you most definitely would want to know what the font is. Definitely an area where I recommend, once again, look at your dismiss messages every now and again, just to make sure there isn't something in there that might unintentionally be suppressed for a bit longer than you may have, initially, I would say, intended. All right, so let's take another look here. Now, the registry. So this is each key current user software SOLIDWORKS. This is an area when SOLIDWORKS is closed and I want to sort of reset, all of my customizations and everything, HKey current user software SOLIDWORKS, that I will rename. Now, the reason I'll rename it is because when I launch it again, that specifically named registry entry, SOLIDWORKS will launch as if it's launching for the first time. So you saw it presented me with the YOLA and everything else. Now, when will I do this? Well, there are ways within the software to reset customizations. We'll look at those in just a moment. However, usually what I do is I make a practice whenever I'm upgrading to a major release, let's say going from, let's say 2024 to 2025, for example. What I'll do is I will essentially rename that key so that when SOLIDWORKS launches, it's launching freshly for the first time, and 2025 is implementing for the first time, writing for its first time to my registry, its own branch of keys and values. It just feels a bit fresher. Maybe it isn't inheriting anything unintentionally from 2024 that might make it act a little strangely or undesirably. So usually, just as a matter of practice, I will do that. There are ways when you uninstall, let's say you wanted to really be clean about it, you wanted to uninstall before you install a new version, where you uninstall and you can tell it to, hey, delete registry keys within the installer. Delete, system folders or whatever within SOLIDWORKS. You can have it do that. But this is a really easy way to kind of do a quick cleanse. So it's HE current user software SOLIDWORKS while SOLIDWORKS is closed. Do not confuse that for HQ local machine. Do not rename that one HE current user software SOLIDWORKS. So I would say, do that on your own volition for sure. But it is an area where I've found particularly useful in terms of workspace upkeep and customization. All right, so area 2 of 8, search and help integration. So essentially, in terms of the workspace customization point here, essentially you're making it so it's easier to find things and easier to help yourself in terms of leveraging the interface. So search is huge, right, in terms of being able to operate within SOLIDWORKS efficiently. I almost want to talk about some topics that aren't necessarily SOLIDWORKS related, but are areas that I'm using in terms of using SOLIDWORKS today, namely LLMs, which we know I use for all sorts of things here at my work at Dassault Systèmes, but definitely use for some SOLIDWORKS related tasks as well. And we'll see that in a few areas here in the presentation. I mentioned for sure, right, this is 2025. It's the year 2025. Things are different. and we're using different tools, both inside and outside of SOLIDWORks. One example of this as well that is inside of SOLIDWORks now is the forums. So the SOLIDWORks forums are now available inside the task pane as of FDO1 of 2025. We have a cool example or I have a cool example there to show you in terms of how to possibly leverage them. And then I'll show you how to use MySolidWorks. And I have a few pointers there, once again, in terms of what is new, maybe not in 2025, but what is new sort of in the recent past that you might be interested in there. So I definitely recommend, whether you're using PDM, whether you're using 3D Experience, to leverage search. And part of workspace customization and leveraging a proper workspace is knowing when to use SOLIDWORks for the areas that it's really good at and it's customized for, and when to use a different area, such as Windows Explorer, right? Or your browser in the case of Explorer. So I really like using PDM, even if I'm in a single user environment, which I am most of the time, because it enables me to be able to search on multiple different descriptors or properties. Same with the platform, which we'll notice in just a moment. Thing is, with PDM, it is on-premise storage, so it runs a very light version, at least PDM standard does, a very light version of SQL, which gives it that database backbone that makes it easy to search against. Windows search, I've never liked it, to be honest with you. It's worked better, I will say, in recent years for me. But being able to search based on my different model attributes, my different custom properties, having all those database indexed and retrievable very easily, and then also these niceties of having like a viewer within Windows Explorer makes PDM a real champion in my book. And then if we look forward, this is just another example of just making things searchable within your interface. So once again, you can use the platform. So if you've bought SOLIDWORks on subscription, over the past year and a half or so, you do have access to what we call cloud services for SOLIDWORks. Essentially, you can use it in a lot of different ways. But even if you're just storing your models in a single user environment, again, it makes things really searchable, and it integrates very well within the SOLIDWORks UI we saw there. So there, with that brake caliper example, you'll notice in the feature tree, the part name is not brake caliper. That's actually the description of the part. And by searching brake caliper, if I don't know the part number, it's very easy to be able to find things. And you can search based on description or any number of different characteristics. You can filter a lot of different options. So in terms of customizing your workspace, being able to search and find things, definitely recommend it. This example here, you can see I'm using ChatGPT, though you can probably use a lot of different LLMs for this kind of thing. We saw Aura as an example of a AI engine that we're developing here at Dassault Systèmes. A lot of people have ventured into this area, namely using an LLM like ChatGPT to ask questions like, "Hey, make me a macro." I will say, and we'll see this example as we go in a moment. I actually cleaned this one up a little bit, so I'll show you later, and I'll offer it to you guys too if you want to use it. Essentially, this example that I had it create for me was to make a macro that will check my part and it sketches for underdefined sketches. So what it's designed to do is essentially look through the entire feature tree, tell me if any sketches are underdefined, and then tell me which those are in a simple OK message box. So it does a pretty good job at it. It's indexed a lot of different macros, and it's able to sort of synthesize that information and give us custom macros in some cases that work pretty well, in other cases that need a bit of editing. And I'll talk about some common culprits there. But yeah, it's a really good way to be able to get help or also just have it maybe generate some custom stuff for you. Another way to get help, I mentioned this was new in FDO1, was the ability to leverage the SOLIDWORks forums within the task pane interface. So we talked about this on Delivery Day yesterday, our first ever episode of SOLIDWORks Delivery Day, concerning features that came out during the 2025 FDO1 release. You can see there's a simple query here. How do I get dual dimensions? We did a simple screenshot, paste it in there, publish. We go back later, we'll see, hey, we got an enter to how to activate the dual dimension display. And then from there, we can just turn it on. It's a very simple thing, but in terms of leveraging your UI and maximizing its capabilities, definitely look out for that forum area. The forums are not new, but the capacity to be able to access it within the task pane is what's new. as of FD01. All right, so let's check the chat here. All right, it looks like Sean is going swimming on his deep dive. Yeah, absolutely. So once again, guys, any questions, definitely let me know. I'm looking out there. Okay, so let's explore. Let's go back into SOLIDWORKS and show how to leverage MySolidWorks. So you'll notice within SOLIDWORKS, and we'll talk about the S key once again a little bit later in some deeper at some deeper levels. But if I press S in SOLIDWORKS, many of us know this. This is one of the best tools in SOLIDWORKS, I think, in terms of the UI. Being able to press S and have a command search show up right next to your cursor. Now, those of you who've used SOLIDWORKS for some time know that there actually is a command search here, right? However, if you have the command search right next to your cursor almost all the time now, what I start to wonder is, what is the use of having it here? One other area to look for is MySolidWorks. So if you go to search MySolidWorks, and let's say type in SolidWorks, you can type in sheet metal or fundamentals. So that showed up on my other screen here. Pull that over. So what that does is it takes that query, plops it right here within my default browser, and then I can go to training, filter there, and you can see all courses labeled fundamentals and SolidWorks, right? So I can see SolidWorks CAD fundamentals. Click on that. And there you go. So if you're a new SolidWorks user, if you're just looking to get a refresher, maybe on areas where you haven't gone into such deep depth, or you might want to see, hey, how does SolidWorks officially tell me, how I should be doing this? This is definitely a really good learning course to explore. One thing I really wanted to show you though is if you go to any of these lessons, say the first one, SolidWorks Basics and UI, you'll see it asks me to log in or join. But the part I really wanted to show you here is that you can see it shows you who it's available to. So you can see it's available to all registered users. So we have a lot of training out there that is available to all registered users. So if you get stumped in an area of the UI, that might be an area to keep active. Once again, if you go back to the search MySolidWorks area, keep that active, keeps it top of mind. Once again, you're not losing anything because command search is always right here. Just press S, it shows up. So hope that one was helpful there. All right, so let's continue on here. Where are we going to swim? Okay, so reference and file handling. So document groups is an example I'll show that's new in 2025. Should have added that there next to it, but this is new in 2025. I think you guys will like it. I'll talk through as well. One thing that kind of was jogged in my mind just now was there are some areas of the software that are similar to document groups that I'll mention as well. But external reference handling, version control, and locking, and then document groups. So the first area that we'll explore together is external reference handling. This is a very popular area of SOLIDWORKS in terms of people wanting to know, different practices, how different companies are handling external references. So in essence, when we talk about external references, you can see it has its own area here within the software. What we are talking about is the ability to, let's say within the context, commonly in assembly, where you will define a part, or you will define a portion, say, of even the assembly, let's say an assembly level sketch, by the context of another part or another subassembly in the assembly. So for example, let's say you do an extrusion in an assembly while you're editing a part, and you say that you want the extrusion to go up to the surface of another part in the assembly. Well, the part that you are extruding within actually now has a reference to that other part, and the reference resides within the assembly. As you're probably thinking, this creates a degree of complexity, right? Because if we have a part that is defined by itself within itself, right? You open file, new part, and you just make the part, and there's no external or extraneous definition anywhere. There's no dependency on any other file. Then by default, that's probably the simplest way to model something, right? At least from a file referencing standpoint. So I would recommend within this area that we take a look at a few of these options. So one of these areas that's off by default is allow multiple context for parts when editing in assembly. So this I do recommend keeping off unless you find some reason to turn it on. Uh, Essentially, what this allows you to do is to kind of do the example that I said, we were doing up to surface, and then continue to define that part, and then maybe have another reference to another part in the same assembly, which once again can create some additional complexity, and maybe not complexity that you are perhaps looking to have. One practice I have seen people do, however, is when they are establishing external references, they might do it for the initial definition, and then they might go and break the references before they kind of progress the part or the assembly along in its maturity. Which I would say, unless there's reason to keep the reference, if you're looking to just establish the initial shape of the part or the preferred shape, and you're not looking for it to keep that file reference, you might want to break it at that point. So it's all according to design intent, but I would say for sure with this one, I would probably keep it off unless, for example, there's some reason within your design practices. And we know within SOLIDWORKS, there are a lot of different things that you guys are doing out there. Unless there's some odd reason, then let me know in the chat if you come across it where you want to check this on and keep it on. Once again, this is a system option, so this is really global. So any part, any assembly that you're using, it will continue to allow those to occur if you have this checked on. So I just thought that was worth mentioning. It is off, I believe, by default, but once again, probably wouldn't change it unless, again, there is some reason you really run into where you really want to turn it on and there is a reason for it. And I would say as well, if you are turning it on, definitely communicate that to your coworkers. Try to be kind of clean in your SOLIDWORKS practices there. All right, so a couple other examples. So I talked about versioning and file unlocking. So I thought this was a good example to show off a new enhancement that we have within FD01 of 2025. Namely design iterations. And we have something very similar in SOLIDWORKS PDM, as you see here in the platform, whereby essentially we're making different versions or different iterations that we can explore back to. Now, these don't constitute new revisions, right? Rev A, Rev B, Rev C. They're basically just sort of reserving a state of the file, whether that's a part, drawing, or assembly, that we can explore back to. And of course, you see within the pane, as we know within a lot of PDM systems, when the platform all the same, you can lock, unlock, version. So in terms of making your workspace work for you, consider making this part of your workspace, right? Once again, if you bought SOLIDWORKS anywhere within the recent past, you likely have cloud services already. And if you're a SOLIDWORKS user who has SOLIDWORKS Professional or Premium, you have access to at least PDM Standard. If you're not sure, we have access to, once again, even if you're a single user, this can be really helpful. Just check in with your value-added reseller and they can help you out there. But in terms of, once again, customizing your UI, your workspace, and making it work for you, that's one I recommend. So this is document groups. This is new in 2025. This didn't quite make the cut of the larger What's New video that we created. But essentially what this is allowing us to do, document groups that is it's giving us the ability to establish certain groupings of parts, assemblies, and or drawings that we wish to have reopened in a single click. So you'll see here we had a few parts opened, a few assemblies rather, and we define those as part of the document group. And then within the pane that we just showed just a moment ago, we were able to open that back up in just a single click. So that came out not in FD01, but just in 2025, the sort of general availability release. So if you have 2025, whether it's FD0 or FD1, you have access to document groups. Let us know in the chat, once again, if that's an area that you might look to leverage in the future. I mentioned just a moment ago, it sort of jogged my mind on another option that I wanted to mention here. So I'm going to flip back just a moment to SOLIDWORKS. So there's an option here under General that I wanted to call out. I didn't plan to do this during the presentation, but I wanted to anyway, just because I just mentioned it. So open last used documents at startup, that's set to never. So I usually recommend, I will typically close SOLIDWORKS or really any large application that I have, let's say once a day. I know other people have different habits, but I'll usually do once I do shut down. I will be honest, I shut down my computer every day. at the end of the day, just to like clean things up. But within for SolidWorks specific purposes, I will close SolidWorks midday if I'm working on it a lot in that given day. And then, of course, at the end of the day, when I shut down my applications, shut down my computer, all my applications, they turn off. So this area, if you are looking to do that, but you're like, I don't want to have to close out everything and all that, you can set this to something else, right? You can set it to, right now it's set to never. You can set it to always. So if you're like, hey, I'm fine to close it, but I want all my stuff to come back when I open SolidWorks, you can set that to always. The cool thing about this too is you can just try it. If you don't like it, just change the option back to never. So I wanted to mention that one once again, because it kind of reminds me a little bit of the intent of document groups, being able to open up groupings of files that you commonly work on together, kind of whenever you please. All right, so our next area, user interface and workflow customization. I think we're doing pretty good on time. So we're about 30 minutes in here. So a few areas here that I think you'll be interested in. So we have turning CommandManager tabs on and off, which some of you may know about, some of you may not. Toolbars, there are so many already predefined toolbars within the interface you can turn on. We'll give some quick examples of those. Using the design library. So we did, once again, SOLIDWORKS Delivery Day for FTO1 2025 yesterday. And we had someone in the chat, someone I happen to know, who said, oh, what the design library, this is awesome. So quick plug for design library there. I mentioned design library itself had been around for quite some time. The design library was an area in FTO1 that was enhanced slightly in a particular way. But once again, design library itself is not new. Doing comments and markups within the model, once again, leveraging your workspace that way. Accessing a chat inside of SOLIDWORKS, which is another way to think of some of the tools you have within cloud services today. That came out back in 2025. And then the web toolbar, which you might be thinking, what is the web toolbar and why are you talking about that in the course of SOLIDWORKS? I'll give you an interesting use case for that because I don't really see a lot of people talking about the web toolbar. Okay, so first thing we'll show is turning on and off CommandManager tabs. So if you right click on the tab on the CommandManager, you can turn tabs on and off. What you're seeing here is we, in 2025, added a CommandManager tab out of the box for SOLIDWORKS PDM. So if you have the CAD editor license type and you're looking to use SOLIDWORKS PDM in 2025, you can actually turn that tab on. Now, there are a whole host of tabs that you can turn on and off that make it so that you might not have to make a new tab, though you can, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. But once again, if you're, let's say, in a part interface and you want to turn on or off sheet metal tools or surfacing tools, just know it's a very simple right click, just like we saw there, to access the predefined tabs that the system gives you and to easily turn them on, off, however you want. So another example here I wanted to show you, these are toolbars. So toolbars, you can right click on the CommandManager in a lot of areas actually, turn these toolbars full of different buttons on and off. I usually keep my interface pretty clean. And as you can see here, if you go to the customize area and select reset to defaults, you now have the option to not just reset every customization, but reset certain areas of customization. So we added this just a few years ago. If you select reset the defaults, it asks you, hey, do you want to just reset your toolbar customizations and get rid of all those? Just your CommandManager customizations and get rid of those? Or do you want to reset all customizations? So you now have the option to do that. And, in terms of things to remove from your interface, to remove clutter, to undistract yourself. So that is definitely one that I was happy to see for sure. So this is actually the example that I showed yesterday during delivery day, where you're able to activate the design library to re-add commonly used features. So in this case, what I'm adding is this bolt circle set of holes. And what's new in FTO1 is the ability to add the model-based definition, this sort of 3D model-based definition here, the 3D PMI. So that when you re-add the bolt circle here, so you'll see I added to that face right there on the sheet metal bracket, and then I select the sort of circular edge to establish the reference for the concentric circle. It then re-adds the PMI. But once again, that's new in FTO1. The rest of it you could have done for years. So design library area, leveraging that part of the UI, which is active by default within your workspace, is really a good way to reuse commonly used features, not have to continue to make them over and over and over again. And this is an area within your system options where you can share a file location. So if you add a design library feature and then put it in a mutually accessible area, this can be managed through PDM, can be managed through the platform, and some people actually just use a share drive to sort of co-leverage these, I guess. Multiple people within your company, multiple people within your overall workplace will be able to access the same design library features. So in terms of minimizing errors, which was when I sent out a poll on the SOLIDWORKS YouTube channel asking what you guys would like to see in this episode, a lot of you guys said, I'd love to make less errors, minimize errors through any customization or any different leveraging of the workspace, the user interface. This is definitely one of them. This is definitely one of those areas that I recommend exploring a bit further. All right, so back with the sewing machine here. Talked about, just a moment ago, resetting customizations. With the sewing machine, in this instance, we're talking about adding comments, so adding model comments. The main reason I wanted to discuss this here, we showed a quick example yesterday during delivery day where you can actually, within the options now, set it so that when you add comments to a model, you are turning on what are called comment indicators in the feature tree. So if you right click in the feature tree, you can turn on comment indicators, and that makes it so that when you add comments to a feature, to a component, to a mate, for example, really anything in the tree for others to see, or say for yourself in the future, you have a little icon next to the part, assembly, mate icon, sketch icon, whatever it is you're adding a comment to, so that, once again, it is very clear that there's something that warrants attention within that particular artifact in the tree. A lot of enhancements just a couple years ago to comments. You saw we were able to add different colors. Of course, we're able to add images, different typefaces, date stamping. So really a pretty malleable tool to be able to leverage. And then I mentioned chat in SOLIDWORKS. So if you have cloud services for SOLIDWORKS, you have it. Like, I don't know how else to say it, you have it. This is one area where you don't have to store all your data on the cloud. You don't have to, share files using it. You can if you want to. But you can even just use it as a chat interface for your team. So you can see here, this is a quick example of two different designers collaborating on the modeling part just by sharing images, sharing a rotatable 3D file with some markups, using the tools that are made available to you in cloud services for SOLIDWORKS. But once again, even if you're just using it as a chat, it's one more tool that allows you to not have to leave SOLIDWORKS. So if you have cloud services for SOLIDWORKS, once again, many of you do, and might just be waiting for you out there, definitely look into using this as a tool to leverage. Once again, one less reason to leave SOLIDWORKS, and it natively fits right within it. So let's explore. Once again, I'm laughing because it's like, what is this, right? Like, a lot of people might not even know that this exists. So the web toolbar. And honestly, I don't know when this was implemented in SOLIDWORKS. I don't see people demoing on it. I don't see people really using it too much. But I'll tell you why I like it. Okay. All right. So I'm going to open up a new part. So we talked about how there's the forums in the UI. We talked about how you can access chat within the UI. We talked about MySolidWorks, switching the command search to MySolidWorks so that it's right in front of your face and it kind of encourages you to look for help or look to upskill yourself. We showed in a previous example that you can turn on these toolbars. So if I right click an empty space here in the command manager, I have access to toolbars. And then this is really a whole host of different tools, or tool suites, if you will, that correspond to different areas of the software. So you can see I have one for aligning, one for assemblies, blocks, configurations. So you can kind of look through these at your leisure, selection filters. But this one called web. So if I turn on the web toolbar, you can see I have a few buttons here. So I'll zoom in so you can see a little bit easier. So you'll see I have a few buttons there. I can add links within the interface, and I can also open up web pages. And you'll see I have a drop down for different web pages that I may have added in the past. So I'm going to insert a hyperlink here. Essentially, what's going to happen is when you have this active on a given web page via this dropdown and you select to open it, it just opens up your web browser. So in essence, it's almost like having a bookmark tab, like you have within Google Chrome within SolidWorks. So think about it. If you want to access McMasterCard, or if you want to access the SolidWorks subreddit, or if you want to access the SolidWorks user forums within a full screen browser-enabled interface, your 3D Experience platform area. This is just one way where you can add some really, or your company website. Let's say if you're doing, or you have like an ERP portal, a purchase parts area. There's a lot of areas that you can put in here that make it a lot easier to go right from SolidWorks into a desired web page. So let's say within here, I say, www.proteusmotion.com. Okay. There we go. proteusmotion.com. Okay. Let's see, I think I forgot the www dot. There we go. So it is not adding. Darn. I think it might be defaulting to cancel. Let's use SolidWorks there. So if you select SolidWorks, you'll see it opens. Man, I just tried this like yesterday and it worked. So I did add it. It's probably something where when I press enter, it may have been defaulting to cancel as the default option. But once again, if you just activate it, you can try it on your end. And it gives you, once again, the ability to just basically go to any web page. Once again, like kind of like a bookmark bar within SolidWorks. So I thought that was pretty neat. All right, let's check out the chat here. It's been a while. Let's see. The new document groups is freaking awesome. Yeah, very, very interesting. I'm betting that Sean's interface is nowhere as clean as Ivan Lowen's. I don't know. I mean, I personally, like I find myself, I'm resetting things all the time. So my interface is probably pretty clean for that reason. I would say if I didn't have to reset my interface all the time for making videos and stuff, making demos for what's new and everything, it probably would be a lot more scattered for sure. But that is funny. Okay. All right. So the next topic here. So this is part 2 of the user interface area. Of course, predictably, a lot of different things that we can get through here. So the design binder, haven't talked about that. Let us know. Let me know in the chat if you have heard of the design binder before. It's an area that I found that we don't really talk about too much, but it's also an area in the SolidWorks software that has been around for quite some time. So let me know if you've heard of it before. We'll see an example in just a moment of ways you can leverage it. Just one example. There are a lot of ways you can leverage it and a lot of ways you can think to leverage it once you know it's there. Design library for common components. So not just features in the library, but also components. Using mouse gestures. So I'll show you a relatively new, very neat example there. And then we'll look at custom tabs in the CommandManager, splitting the feature tree, which first time I saw this, I thought was magic. Basic workspace mode, which is new in FD01. The command predictor, which is an AI-based CommandManager tab that we introduced with 2025, the first proper release there. And then turning off menu items, because once again, as we're seeing in the chat, sometimes being clean in the interface is the best way to go. So I also wanted to emphasize that you can turn things off in SolidWorks that are there by default. And we'll look at a couple examples there. So first off, though, let's look here at this brief example where we're adding a design binder. So if we right-click on Hide Show Items, you'll see it takes us right over, if you do it in the feature tree, to the Feature Manager area within Options. And if you go to the Design Binder, it's set to automatic, which basically means if there's something already in it, like if somebody sent you a part in it with the Design Binder holding document, it will already be active. Otherwise, it won't be active. But you can show it. And if you show it, you can add an attachment. So in this example, what I'll do is I'll add an attachment of common SolidWorks keyboard shortcuts, and I'll check links so that it's set to update if there are any documents or any updates to that document. So it's not necessarily going to store that PDF that I've added to it in the part file. It's going to link to its defined location on whichever hard drive storage location you've set. So this is a very simple table of some keyboard shortcuts, very simple example. If you don't select link, that checkbox that I just showed, when you add a design binder item, what it will do is it will store that document or documents within the part file, which, as you can guess, makes it so that you are almost hiding something in the part file. It also makes it so that the part file will objectively just be larger, right? Because it's having to house whichever PDF, whichever Word doc, whatever you're putting into it in the design binder itself. So basically the part file becomes a bit more like a zip file, if you think of it that way, where the contents can only be opened and only be visible if you are able to open the part, which is kind of cool. The little kid in me thinks that's neat. But I'm not sure in terms of company practices if you will like that, love it, or outright say that that's not okay. Here's an example using the design library interface to actually add library parts. So typically you'll find with library components, right, these are commonly used kind of standard components. So let's say within this button interface, within the Proteus, we had a few different iterations of it, a few different iterations of the Proteus arm, if you will. And we are finding that we wanted to add the same sort of button layout interface there. You can basically drag and drop and add it right from the design library. And once again, these are storable. So storable within a database system. So it could be PDM, it could be the platform. Both can be used so that, let's say, one person is able to add design library items and then everyone kind of maps to that same location. So definitely something I would recommend looking into. If you do have those standard kind of library style components, once again, it's in the interface, it's in your workspace. You just kind of have to leverage it. Maybe add a folder, customize it however you'd like. It's very simple to set up, but it's one of those things where you just kind of have to acknowledge it's there to get started. So the mouse gestures, as you can see, right click, drag. This example is an example that we showed during What's New for 2025, where we actually added the ability to via Visualize's new API to send the visual of a part, basically the framing of a part or an assembly, to Visualize to be rendered, which, as we know, renderings or JPEGs, PNGs, whatever they are, we can then add them to our presentations. So mouse gestures, and I'll show you here during this quick example, mouse gestures are definable within the customized interface. Very easy way to get customized is you just right click here, empty space, customize. And then you'll see there's a whole area for mouse gestures. You'll notice that on the right-hand side, we have four different options by default, four gestures, if you will, for each kind of major mode of SOLIDWORKS. So you have your part mode, assembly mode, drawing mode, and then when you're in a sketch. However, at this point, you get up to 12. So you can see 12 different gestures within SOLIDWORKS, and you can customize those as you go. Basically, just adds, of course, more to the ring here. So you can search, add, take ones away. You don't have to use these. You just basically hold down the right mouse button, slide to the right, slide up, slide down, slide to the left, and it will give you essentially the options that you've preset within Customize. So I wanted to give a quick shout out to mouse gestures. I don't really use them so much. I use the S key primarily, but I also want to give a shout out as well to that new Visualize enhancement. I know a lot of people are using PhotoView 360 for the rendering needs. Tons of people use Visualize at this point, but adding that enhancement to be able to kind of offload or send a rendering job to Visualize directly from SOLIDWORKS was a much asked for and much needed enhancement in my eyes. Okay, so next, to wrap up this section, we'll look at custom CommandManager tabs, how to create those, which is very simple. And I'll talk through a few different use cases for doing so. Splitting the feature tree, basic workspace mode, which we introduced in FD01, which just came out just a few weeks ago, as well as the command predictor, which came out with the sort of initial release of 2025. And then being able to turn off menu items, because we've been talking a lot about how to leverage things that are already on or turning things on. But once again, I do want to emphasize that it can be equally, if not more beneficial, to turn things off, because there are a lot of simple buttons inside of SOLIDWORKS, and maybe some that we don't want to leverage or don't have to. All right, so CommandManager custom tabs. So we talked about just a moment ago through that PDM example. That's really easy to turn ones on. So if you go to tabs, right click on the tab here, go to tabs, and then you'll see all these different options, all these different tabs that we here at SOLIDWORKS have already provided you in effect to be able to turn on. And so let's say the markup tab, turn it off, just check it. And you can always turn it back on. If I want to add a custom tab, you can go to right-click, customize. And then you'll see when I go to customize, something really interesting happens with the command manager. It gets really expansive. It starts to show you all of the possible tabs. The ones that are a bit grayer in terms of their text, you'll notice that those are ones that are turned off in my particular interface. But when I have customized this option turned on, those are now available. Okay, so I just wanted to point that out there. One area, however, that I want to point out as well is the ability to turn these on. So shouldn't have zoomed out so quickly. So if you right click here on any of these tabs, you can say, where are we here? New tab, there it is. So new tab, I can zoom in here. Right in the corner. All right, new tab. All right, so if you select new tab and you say empty tab, you can see I can say Sean's new tab. And then within commands, I can start to search for commands, or I can even go up to the search box here and search commands here. And I can begin to drag and drop them either from the customize interface or as I go within SOLIDWORKS, even if customize is closed. So let's say here, if I wanted to add the segment tool. So the segment tool is a tool that basically splits sketches into segments. So you can do it with lines. You can do it with circles, for example. Let's say I wanted to add that. So you can see Sean's new tab now has segment added to it. Then you'll see as I leave the customize area, you'll see Sean's new tab is a new CommandManager tab. So this is really customizing your interface there. You can always take them off as well. So if we go to customize, drag this off in empty space, you'll see it disappears. So a couple of use cases for this. One area that I would think to potentially make a custom tab for is features that you intend to explore later. So if you're in the forums or on Reddit, you're seeing, hey, somebody used the lip and groove feature. What's that? You can make a custom tab and you can basically add commands that represent features that you want to explore later, things you want to learn later. So you can treat it that way. Or just sort of like, you ever have that drawer in your house that just has a bunch of utilities? I know we all do. A bunch of utilities in your house or your apartment that are useful some of the time, and you don't want to throw any of it away, but you're like, I just want to remember that's there. I want to know that it's in that drawer. You could also kind of make that SOLIDWORKS drawer for yourself. So that's another area where the command manager making a new tab to me will be naturally useful for me as a SOLIDWORKS user. All right, so another area I want to show off is being able to split the feature tree. So I want to open up an assembly here to illustrate that. So I'm going to open up this Proteus assembly. So the feature manager tree, we all know we can access components, and we can access subassemblies and mates, sketches, features, all sorts of different information within the feature tree layout. We can access configurations, appearances, right? But sometimes, especially if you have a feature tree that's fairly long or expanded, right? You might have a feature tree that is a bit ornery to navigate. And one area that I want to recommend or just call your attention to is this ability right here where my cursor is, this bar. You'll see the cursor feedback changes just a little bit to be able to pull that down. And notice when I pull that down, it gives me another instance effectively of the tree. So you'll notice, okay, so I'm kind of exploring there. And this gives me the ability to say explore components up top, but then still access other areas like my planes and my, my history. And, if I'm using centers, which we'll talk about in just a moment, the ability to do that, or maybe just my mates. So there are a lot of ways you can kind of customize this the way you see fit in terms of how you leverage this sort of newfound split mode of the feature tree. Maybe you want to have your mates expanded and available on the bottom, always kind of sitting there. And then you want to have like your component exploration up here, or split it to where you're looking at configurations on the top and then your feature trees on the bottom, or your display states, right? There are a lot of ways you could look to leverage this particular setup. And you might find that it's quite handy given how you tend to work. So once again, a lot of people never really learn that you can actually pull that down and split it. The way I learned, I believe, was I think I saw someone doing it. I was like, what there's something wrong with this assembly. Like, why do you have 2 feature trees? And then I think it was probably that person or someone else when I mentioned it. They're like, oh yeah, you just pull down the bar, as is, as are most things with the software, as you guys know. All right, so let's take a look here. Big fan of the design binder. Seen that in the chat. Awesome. There is an example macro on how to use the visualize API in the help file. Yes, great point. So I'll show that here. This is true. This is also an area I wouldn't be surprised if we just add this to SOLIDWORKS at some point without having it be a macro. But this was a kind of a dual example of being able to kind of use a macro as a mouse gesture, which we'll talk about macros in a moment actually, and the ability to do this newly in Visualize, right? Offload a rendering basically from within SOLIDWORKS directly to Visualize and have it do the job there. But great point, Axelrod. Thank you very much. Okay, so basic workspace mode. Let's head back into SOLIDWORKS. So this is new as of FD01. So basic workspace mode. So a lot of us know, you see the tree here, right? We have our assembly, history, sensors, annotations, our planes, our origin, all of our components, mates, all these tabs, right? So quite a lot of tools at our disposal. But you think back to when you first started using SOLIDWORKS, and maybe some of you just started using it recently, it can be overwhelming at times. You have a lot of options, and it can be hard to know what you need to know, at least to get started. So there is an area within the software now where if you go to View, Workspace, Simplified Interface, where it does just that. It simplifies the interface down to one tab, a new tab that we call Basic Tools. So we're in Assembly. This is called Basic Assembly Tools. You would see Basic Modeling Tools if you're in a part environment, Basic Drawing Tools if you're in a drawing environment. And it kind of gives you the relative essentials to get moving, get started. Now, this doesn't mean that you can't add tabs as you go. You can keep it in simplified interface mode and add more tabs as you go. So if I go to right-click tabs, you can add the proper assembly tab that we all know. You can add evaluate. So you can add things, turn them on and off as you go. One area that I might recommend turning on if you are a new user especially, or if you're just someone who's curious about some new areas of the software in 2025 is the command predictor. So if you turn on the command predictor, whereas basic assembly tools remain static throughout the design process in that mode, command predictor will change and develop as your model and as your assembly and as your drawing develops on its own. So in other words, these options will change as we kind of go about the modeling process. So let's say I open up this sub-assembly here. So we have breadcrumbs. I'm going to go with this one here. Okay, so this is the handle. So you can see if I go and look at the command predictor options here versus what we had in the other assembly. See if I go in and let's grab this part. This part is imported part. It's actually curious. Let's see what it says here. Interesting. So let's see. You probably would want to, with imported parts, essentially, you might want to run FeatureWorks on this. You might not want to, depending on exactly what you're hoping for. It says a solid body. But you would see as I would go, essentially what this command predictor would do is it would just continue to sort of mutate and change just a bit based on where you are and based on what the tree reads. Right now, it's pretty static because this is an imported part. But the command predictor main point is that it'll continue to kind of develop, continue to change, continue to add or take away buttons based on what it perceives you might be doing next. So definitely look out for that one. All right, so the last one here I want to show off is turning off menu items. All right, so let's head back to SOLIDWORKS here. So a really easy example to show you here is within Tools. Within Tools, there are a lot of different areas that you may wish to explore, but then there's a lot of areas that you might never explore, such as export to AEC. Potentially, you're never actually looking to use that option. So I would recommend, if there are areas like this where you are looking to, or you're not looking to use something, to leverage this final button click here within each menu, or most menus you'll see within SOLIDWORKS, which is Customize menu. So notice if I click Customize menu at the very end, each of these areas turns into checkbox selections. So I can turn off whole, option sets, right? So if I'm never looking to use compare tools, which I recommend checking out if you're using SOLIDWORKS, where you can compare bodies, compare properties, compare feature trees, you can actually just turn it off so that you're never seeing it. It's also interesting to look to observe areas that are turned off by default. So there are some areas where SOLIDWORKS has it available within that dropdown, but it is not turned on. So in this area, let's just continue with export to AEC, uncheck it, I leave, I go back, export to AEC is gone. So that's one thing I wanted to mention in terms of being able to limit clutter. Using the sort of simplified interface mode does that kind of naturally by removing tabs, a lot of CommandManager tabs you may not be using, as well as some of the areas within the task pane. I did want to point out that you can also customize the task pane. So if you go to Customize, I think that's on my other screen, so I'll pull that over. You can check these on and off. So once again, it's mostly in the interest of limiting distractibility. If you're like me, I like to have a clean interface. I like to have things that I need on, things I don't need or don't wish to explore anytime soon off. So being able to click that customize area, whether you're in a dropdown, a menu dropdown, or task pane, or wherever you are, I find to be quite helpful in that regard. All right, let's see. Removing menu items is also a great way to teach your coworkers a lesson for not attending SOLIDWORKS live episodes. Yes, very good. Fast Flores, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Will this live be saved later? Yes. Thank you for asking. So this we'll chapterize it, so it's a lot easier to sift through, and it will be live later. So you'll see it on the SOLIDWORKS YouTube. Be sure to share this, give it a thumbs up. It's a great point to mention. I hope now that we've been almost an hour through, just show your appreciation or just share the love. If you've gotten anything out of this episode, I definitely encourage you to share. So last few areas are a little bit shorter than this one. I think this one continues to go on. Productivity tools and automation, obviously a huge and expansive topic. Here we'll talk more about macros. We'll talk about favorite apps within cloud services, and we'll talk about why I like to set up my favorite apps in cloud services as well, not just that it's there. Auto repair mates, reattach dangling parts and drawings. These are all relatively newer. I'll say within the past 3 or 4 years, each of these came out. So I just wanted to call those out to make sure to look out for them in your interface. Sensors, which are within your workspace, you can set them up to tell you when you've kind of gone out of bounds on something according to your design intent, geometrically or otherwise. Expanding your workspace, right, by using a 3D mouse or a Streamdeck. So I'm going to talk about Streamdeck, which I own here in just a moment. Some of you may not have heard of Streamdecks. I know a lot of you have heard of 3D mice, but Streamdecks can be another very useful tool. We talked about the S key already, so we'll kind of zoom past that one. Talk about the importance of keyboard shortcuts and then locking features with freeze. So macros. In terms of customizing your interface, there are a lot of areas where you can find macros, even if you aren't coding. There are a lot of online repositories, say with CAD Sharp, which is a great partner of ours. We have Blue Byte as well, so a friend of mine. And also the SOLIDWORKS help. And of course, we have LLMs now that spit out macros. But a lot of different tools, a lot of different repositories, a lot of different solution partners that give you the ability to use macros to basically expand the work you're able to do within your workspace. So you saw here, this is really a plug for a live design episode that I did with Brian Zayas not too long ago. It might have been a year or two ago. And essentially what I did was I gave sort of an intro to automation in SOLIDWORKS. And one of those examples I gave was sort of in the designer's guide to the API, a very simple way of looking at being able to make a user form, a form here where you're able to input values that connect to dimensions, in this case, within a pattern feature, and then able to kind of drive model or assembly creation from that. So it's, in a sense, you're kind of making your own features in a way. So I definitely recommend searching SOLIDWORKS API or Designer's Guide to the SOLIDWORKS API if you're interested in looking more into macros at a very introductory level. So I mentioned a lot of us have cloud services. You can use it as a chat tool. If you just want to use it as a chat tool, you can store your models with it. You can manage maturity. But one area that I want to call to mention is this favorite apps pop out. The reason is you get a lot of different tools within cloud services for SOLIDWORKS, which can be great. But as we all know, if you have too many apps, just like we do in Windows, it can be pretty overwhelming, right? So you don't know exactly what to leverage, what to even try to leverage, what's for you versus what's for someone else doing some other type of work. So I do recommend when you're using cloud services for SOLIDWORKS, as more and more of you are, to just take some time to drag and drop some apps into that favorite apps area. It's a lot like what we've been mentioning throughout the global interface of SOLIDWORKS, right? Turn things on, turn things off as you need them, or on the contrary, as you don't need them. So a few other areas here to look to leverage within the interface these days. So this came out just a few years ago, and it continues to be developed, but this auto repair mates option. So a lot of times we have cases where mates can blow up. Maybe we've overconstrained something, or maybe a reference has been broken. Well, now you can select via right-click or via the context menu this auto repair option, and SOLIDWORKS will attempt to auto repair the mate. And it'll give you this green dialog box if it is successful. Let me know in the chat if you have tried this already and if you had success. I would recommend, whether it's for dangling dimensions, as we'll see here, or with auto repair mates, that you just take a second, take a beat to examine what's been done. I know our software, any software that we use, right, whether it's SOLIDWORKS software or otherwise, can help us speed up our processes. But at the same time, I do, as a human, want to have an assurance that I've given something a once over to make sure that it is correct. In this example, I don't find myself, or I haven't found myself, going to display delete relations a lot. However, we now have this new button in the interface called Repair All Dangling. So if you have a case where you have a lot of dangling dimensions within a part, you can try this Repair All Dangling and see if it can fix them. Once again, make sure the design intent is intact after it's been fixed. But I do recommend using that, or looking to use it potentially, if you have, let's say, one or more dangling dimensions, just in case SOLIDWORKS can fix them for you. Akin to that is in drawings. We can reattach dangling dimensions here. So now we're able to do that much more efficiently, as you're seeing in this quick demo. Reattach, right-click, reattach, and then you go ahead and reattach it to the entity. A lot quicker, a lot easier than the way that it used to be. So you might say, hey, I can just delete them and reattach them. That's fine. But just know that within the interface now, within your workspace, you now have the ability to just do a simple right-click, reattach to reference as you see fit, move about your day. So a lot of you are using 3D mice. We still have, I was just talking to a beginner SOLIDWORKS user yesterday. This is a goofy spoof we did for what's new. We can see that little white device there with all those buttons. That's a Streamdeck. So essentially a Streamdeck is, as you see there, it is a Pane. It's a device with different button layouts. So you have different rows of buttons, and it's a very simple software interface that hooks to it. So I believe Elgato is the manufacturer, and essentially you can map it to keyboard shortcuts. You can map it to opening programs. I see Alex Worsfeld, much easier than trying to grab the tiny dot. Yeah, that's what you used to have to do in drawings, right? Alex there talking about talking about the reattach the dangling there. So thanks for that comment, Alex. Yeah, I agree. That used to be a pain, by the way. So I used to teach the drawings class for SOLIDWORKS, and man, that was not fun. It was because it always used to be like it would be really hard. You're learning how to use something newly, and it would be really hard to get the show up, and it would be really hard to get the tiny dot. And then once you get the tiny dot, it'd be like, all right, well, I had to try that like 4 times, so I'm just going to delete it in the future. But thanks for telling me, and you just break it. So yeah, but look up the Streamdeck. It's kind of like a shortcut device, if you will. Once again, you can map keyboard shortcuts to it, map program launches to it. You can do a lot of elaborate things with it. You can get bigger ones, smaller ones. I think the smallest one they offer is like a 4-button one. So if you wanted to kind of expand your device usage, if that's something you're trying to do, expand your capabilities, yeah. And a lot of 3D mice as well. They have a lot of buttons attached too. So, but yeah, I wanted to call it a Stream Deck because it doesn't seem like it would be a SOLIDWORKS tool, but you can map a lot of things to it. Think like if you map a keyboard shortcut to a macro, then essentially that could be like your macro area, which is kind of neat. Okay. So sensors, there could be a whole deep dive on sensors. Sensors are part of your workspace or part of the UI. If you look in on the left-hand side, they're on by default. Essentially, what we're showing here is an area where a part has gone outside of the boundary of its sheet metal bounding box, which was added just a few years back, the ability to add a sensor within that specific property. So it will give you an alert, essentially, kind of show up as an error if you've gone beyond it. So you can kind of parameterize your model in a bit of a deeper way. So sheet metal bounding boxes are not the only way you can do that. You can use these with simulation. You can use sensors in a whole lot of different capacities parametrically. So just know that that box is not there for quote unquote someone else and not me. You can right click it, add a sensor and explore it, look at the help. I definitely recommend looking at that if you want to work maybe a bit smarter, a bit more efficiently. It might work out for you, it might not. But this is an area where I just find it's massively sort of underspoken about. Okay, so exploring S key, keyboard shortcuts, and locking features with freeze. So let's head back to SOLIDWORKS here. All right, so let us open a part with features. I tried it when I was using the command predictor. I was like, oh man, of course I pick a part that has no features in it. All right, let's see. Let's actually just make one. All right, so make our part with a hole in it. There's the S key. Boss extrude. All right, so make a plate with a hole in it. So grab this, go ahead, make a sketch, and then use my S key again. Circle. Okay. And then I will extrude. So doing a lot of typing. Typically, when I have my interface set up, I will, this is kind of set up to stock settings. You'll see within sketches, within the S key interface, it has certain buttons. And these buttons I use quite commonly, don't get me wrong. But you can also add them here. So insert the command there. And then you'll see from now on, when I press the S key, such as the case with cut, I have the extruded cut there. So the extruded cut, right click through all. Press D. How many of you knew this? So if you press D when you're in a feature execution or within a sketch, it gives you the confirmation corner right next to your cursor. D as in dog. It's a pretty neat one. All right, so it's a very simple part, obviously. Just to show an example, we have something called the freeze bar, which we introduced quite a while now. So if you go up to your options and search freeze via this search box, you'll see it's in general settings and it's off by default. But what this can do is it adds this little golden bar, kind of looks like the rollback bar. And instead of starting from the bottom, it starts from the top. And what it does is it basically locks from rebuilding these features that are above the golden line. Now, the usefulness of this is, for example, let's say you have like a very hack and slash sort of surface model part where it was surface extrude and it was surface cut, and you know the deal. You just keep basically hack and slash, surface modeling, whatever. This is a potential usage for the freeze toolbar because if it's not rebuilding, if you don't really care, if it's not rebuilding every single time the feature tree, it can make it a little bit easier for the model to regenerate and thereby be accessible to you for further options. So I definitely recommend looking into the freeze bar there. It's under the General tab in Options, or once again, as you saw I did there, just search the options for freeze. And we don't have a lot of options with freeze in the name, so you'll find it. All right. Awesome. Good to see lively chat here. Okay, so what we'll cover here, we're kind of winding down the episode here with topic area 6 of 8, sketching and feature integrity. Once again, we've already gone over some sketching areas, some feature integrity areas, but we'll go through a few more here. So I'll show you that macro that I created, and I'll talk a bit more about using an LLM like ChatGPT, at least in my observations for making macros, and some common, I don't want to say pitfalls, but just some things to look out for, things that maybe it gets wrong. It gets a lot right, to be honest, but things that it gets wrong and the kind of ways to fix them. So I'll show you that. I'll also offer this macro out. If anyone wants this underdefined sketch report macro, I'm happy to upload it. So just let me know, and I'll add a link in the comments after the episode. Evaluate tab review, some tools there that I think you should keep aware of, and then check sketch for feature, which is a tool that can come up, especially if you're a beginner user, that I recommend looking to leverage here. Okay, so under defined sketch report. So how am I going to add that? So I'm going to go to evaluate here, and then I'm going to right click and then go to customize. A few lessons I want to add here just while we're here. So essentially, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add a button to my evaluate tab. It's going to be a macro button. So you can add macro buttons to, once again, keyboard shortcuts or mouse gestures or to your CommandManager tab. And so if you go and search under commands for macro, you can drag and drop this icon here that says new macro button to the CommandManager. And you'll notice when I do that, what it asks me for is to customize my macro button. So the first area it's looking for me to customize is just tell it which macro I wish to apply to that button. So go ahead and grab that. So check under defined sketches, open, and then I could even do a custom icon for it to make it look like a real feature. So you might be wondering, where'd you get this? So you can make your own icons, of course. In Illustrator, you can have Adobe Illustrator make icons for you. There's also resources like flaticon.com, which I'm a member of. And flaticon.com gives you a lot of really nice PNG items or PNG images. Now, you'll notice that it's looking for a bitmap file. So essentially what I did was I went to Flaticon, I downloaded a PNG, and then I went into Microsoft Paint, and then from Microsoft Paint, I basically saved it as a bitmap, and then it makes it compatible for this particular menu. So see, it adds it there. So tooltip is the name under defined checker, and then for prompt, let's see, checks, sketches. Checks model for under defined sketches. All right, so there you go. There's our new feature in SOLIDWORKS. All right, so let's see here. So I have in this really simple this roll of duct tape that I created. There are two sketches. You can see the minus sign, which means they're both underdefined. Now, if I select this here, you'll see underdefined sketches found, sketch 1, sketch 2. Okay. And then just to prove it works and it's not static text, I will fully define this circle. Let's just make it 55 millimeters diameter, leave, and then run it again. And then it says, okay, underdefined sketches found, sketch 1. So this is a macro that I was able to get from ChatGPT. I will say, however, that with regards to this macro, if anyone's interested in using ChatGPT or something similar for just grabbing macros or trying out different ideas for macros. So I'm editing the macro here. So I think one common thing I've seen, let me know in the chat if you've seen it as well with different LLMs, is if you ask it for a macro, which again, very impressive that it's able to do this. Sometimes what it will do is it will make up API calls. Don't get me wrong, amazing. I mean, it's really awesome. It even comments things for you, which is great. So it gives you a bit of an idea of its thought process, I suppose, in terms of generating the macro. But sometimes it'll get API calls wrong. So for example, like in this case, I had to fix this so that it used the proper call for this get constraint status. I think it misapproximated the call and just called it like get sketch status, which I don't think is an API call officially. So there will be little things like that you'll notice where it will get it wrong and then you'll run the macro and it just won't work. So sometimes they do, I'd say oftentimes actually it does take a bit of debugging in that way, but usually it's just one or two calls that are wrong. So if you can spot them, then you're probably okay to fix it. And honestly, a lot of times, if you use the SOLIDWORKS forums, which again are now in the UI, you can just go to the SOLIDWORKS forums and ask someone, hey, why is this not running? Even if you're not familiar with VBA at all, or the SOLIDWORKS API, and somebody will probably help you. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that. It's a pretty cool utility. It's pretty cool. It's a great technology, very interesting technology, but at the same time, not without its issues at times. Okay, so now I also want to look at the Evaluate tab here. I would say overall, within the Evaluate tab, as we're here, now you won't have underdefined checker, the one I added, but the rest of these are pretty out of the box. There's a lot to potentially use here. A lot of SOLIDWORKS utilities. Performance evaluation, if you have a part that is chugging along and it's taking a real long time to rebuild, maybe consider using the freeze bar if it's one of those crazy surface model parts that you've hacked and slashed and you don't really care about the feature tree. But if you go to performance evaluation, just as an example, as we're here, it gives you an idea of the percentage of time for the rebuild and also the total amount of time in seconds. So there's a lot of interesting and useful potentially tools to use in this evaluate bar. So definitely recommend turning that on. Alex says, yes, I've experienced LLMs making up its own API. Okay, good to know I'm not the only one. I thought I'd done something wrong. Okay. All right, so let's get over to our next topic and our deep dive. So welcome screen and entry points, topic area 7 of 8. So what we're going to cover here is pinning folders and components on the welcome screen. The welcome screen is something that we added a number of years back now, but I do find that it is a really, I would say a really useful space to kind of get your bearings straight especially when you're first learning to use SOLIDWORKS. But all of us were kind of continuing on in our learning, and there are a lot of ways that you can use the welcome tab as well, just like the MySolidWorks search, to continue on to learn new topics, right? Even if you've been using SOLIDWORKS for 3, 4, 5 years, which brings us to the next topic, right? The Learn tab on welcome, property tab builder, as well as import templates for when you're importing models. All right, so let's explore those here. Okay, so a couple of things to note. I'm going to close out of these files here. So I'll close all. Kind of back to a fresh interface. The welcome screen can be turned on here. So if you go to the icon of the house, you can click on Welcome to SOLIDWORKS here, or if you just double click in the interface, it shows up. So you just double click out an empty space, it shows back up for you. So the topic at hand here was pinning folders and components. So recent documents, which you can access through the file menu, of course. Recent documents is also accessible here, and you'll notice that it has a push pin. So if you select the push pin, it'll make it so that it basically stays. So this is like my primary assembly, my primary project. I want to keep revisiting it. There are a lot of ways to make it open right when you open SOLIDWORKS, as we've already discussed earlier in the talk today. But you can also make it so that it stays recent. It stays readily in your view. So you can not only do that with components, but you can also do that with folders. So you can pin a folder. If there's a common project folder, even if it's just for a time that you wanted to pin and reaccess, you can do that. Another area I recommend looking at is the Learn tab. So especially if you're newer or you're just looking to get your feet wet on other SOLIDWORKS topics, this is an area that kind of serves, even if you have like a new employee, right? If you have a new teammate that is maybe coming from a different CAD program, we put these here selectively so that, and I know there's so many buttons, it's hard to really accentuate any one of them in SOLIDWORks. We put these here specifically so that you'd be able to learn a lot easier. There's also this area, Quick Tours, which I acclimated myself with very recently, which I don't think's been in SOLIDWORKS for super long, but I could be totally wrong about that. So SOLIDWORKS Basics. So let's say you want to get somebody familiar with the user interface. So I'll select that, and you'll notice it kind of like takes me around a tour of the UI. It'll actually move my mouse around and open up a model. So it says, all right, the name of the app, the document appears here. Cool. Buttons on next. Select next. You can search your commands there. User icon shows your login status. It's on the other screen there. Command Manager. Feature Manager. Heads up toolbar. 3D Experience task pane. 3D search. You've completed the tour. So, once again, an interesting way to get acclimated for sure within SOLIDWORKS. I'll exit the tour here. All right, so I'm going to go into an empty part for this next little demo. So I wanted to show you guys sort of like entry areas or welcome areas, insertion points, something called the property tab builder. Now you'll notice as I'm in the basic interface mode or the simplified interface mode that one of the things it does, and I don't know how I feel about this personally, but I could see why it does this, is it will actually have you enter into a sketch as soon as you open up a part file, or as soon as you open up a new part, I should say. So you'll see the origin is red. It basically starts off a sketch on the front plane if you're in that mode. You can turn this off. Again, I'm torn. I don't know. I mean, it's one of those areas where I suppose if you're putting someone new to SOLIDWORKS or 3D modeling in the sketch mode, that can be helpful in a way. But I would like to have someone be really keenly aware of the fact that there are planes here before they kind of get too far. Nonetheless, of course, you can press D to get your command corner or your confirmation corner right back to your cursor, or just exit. So let me go out of here. I'm actually going to go ahead and turn that off. Simplified interface. So that was just a checkbox under view if you wanted to turn it off. All right, so if you go to the home area, there is a tool, and I'm not sure how much time you spent under SOLIDWORKS resources lately, but there is a tool called the Property Tab Builder. So if I click on the Property Tab Builder, it will open up. Let's see, it might be on a different screen here. It is. There you go, I just had to drag it over there. We know if you guys have gone into the properties pane within SOLIDWORKS, which is located right up here, you know that each SOLIDWORKS file can have a modeled by, checked by, drawn by, whatever you want to name your properties, commonly a description property, right? And that's up here, right? And you can freeform in those fields and fill them in however you want. However, if you are a CAD admin or you're just trying to be a bit kinder to yourself and you want something a bit more visually appealing, you can use a property tab builder, which actually maps to your properties. So essentially, you can, let's say, put a text box field in this little group container, and you can, add a label here or add a property label. So let's say this is description. And the value, you can have it either to an SW property, which is like a linked system property, or you can say, you can kind of give it a default value here. So let's say description, or you could just leave it blank. If you leave it blank, it will basically just be blank. This is basically like a placeholder value for the user if they would wish to change it. So you can fill all these in. You can see there's checkbox values, radio button values, a lot of different values that you wouldn't necessarily get within the properties pane itself. And from there, essentially what would happen is once you save this, when you go into the properties pane here, it would show up all the same for that file type. So once again, if this is interesting to you, if you want to have more of a kind of catered property layout, this is one of 50 odd ways we've explained today of an area you can explore in your interface to make it work a bit better for you. Yes. All right. So import templates. This is important. All right. So if we go to settings, many of us work with non-native file types. So we're importing documents into SOLIDWORKS maybe fairly commonly. Some people are doing it a lot. Some people are never doing it. If you go to default templates, now this kind of tricks people up sometimes or trips them up. When you're looking for the template that SOLIDWORKS will use when it imports, say, like an IGES file or a step file or some other non-native type of file into SOLIDWORKS, it's not actually going to look and select, sort of a template that's in your document templates location. The templates you see when you go to File New. What it will do by default is it will use the part assembly under drawing. Let's say if you're importing a DXF, for example, it'll use the template that's specified here. And you can have it either set up to always use these templates or to basically prompt the user to select a document template. So that's up to you. In this case, basically these are mapped to very sort of the standard out-of-the-box templates for parts assemblies, and then drawings. I will have to fix this because you can see it's mapped to nothing at this point. But if you have specific templates that are mapped to use the unit system that you use, once again the drafting standard, however else you choose to sort of customize your part assembly under drawings templates, you probably want to go into this default templates area and kind of map it appropriate to your intention there. So as far as entry points, less of an entry point for a user, but more of an entry point for a model or, of course, a drawing. All right, so we have entered the final stretch here, 8 of 8. All right, so I'm going to check back in on the chat here. All right, there we go. Awesome. Okay, let me know, you guys, if you have any questions as we go. Once again, subscribe. We have deep dives going on all year round here. So in terms of admin and deployment, 3 final topics I wanted to explore here. A settings file, for example, if you wanted to back up your settings for future use, let's say if you had to reformat your computer and you wanted to bring back your settings, or even for a new employee. We'll talk about that. Admin images, where you're able to customize how things are installed on different PCs within your work network, as well as backup of custom toolboxes, because I don't really think we have much in terms of video documentation lately on that, and I think it's a very important topic. So first of all, let's look at making a settings file. So this is an area where I will use the command search and search for settings. We've talked quite a bit today about the relative importance, and probably the preference of setting up SOLIDWORKS, your seat of SOLIDWORKS via system options and layouts and such, the way that you want, inclusive of macro toolbars and everything else under the sun, as we've explored, these 50 odd areas, right? If you search settings within SOLIDWORKS and select the settings wizard, what this allows you to do is save those settings, save those customizations that you have created. So a lot of times what I recommend, if you remember to do it, and if you're not in a rush, is when you install freshly your new version of SOLIDWORKS, take some time to set things up the way you want, and then go to the settings wizard and then save out your settings. So that if there's anything that happens where you have to uninstall or you have to reformat your PC, you have those customizations set up. So take those 10 minutes or whatever it's going to be, write down those areas that you actually care about, make those changes, and then save the settings so that later on, if you need to, or if you wish to, let's say you've kind of done a bunch of customizations after the fact, you don't want those anymore. You want to restore things back to as sort of clean as you see it, clean and preferable setting state, you can restore. All right, so if I go to save settings, see go next, so kind of process a bit. And then it not only gives you the ability to save out sort of a registry file there. Sorry, the Zoom's acting up a little bit. It also gives you the ability, if we have the screen maximize here, you can probably see, to customize what is stored in that settings file. So you'll see, system options, toolbar layouts, keyboard shortcuts, mouse gestures, menu customizations, and save views. And then if you finish, it will, in that location that's specified here, save out that SLDREG file for later reuse. So I mentioned it's useful in cases where you are looking to potentially restore your settings for any given reason, but it also could be useful if you have a new employee and you have company standards in terms of different document template locations, in terms of a custom toolbox location for hardware. You can set those up, save it, and then basically you have it restored to that new employee's PC so that you're not having to set up every single pick and click every single time. Works especially well if you guys have sort of a standardized set of PCs, because things are probably mapped out in the registry quite similarly already outside of, and I would also say probably related to SOLIDWORKS. All right. Now, another area, when you protect your protecting your toolbox, I should say, like before a major upgrade, I typically will recommend doing this. And you can see it can be just as simple as that. When you have SOLIDWORKS closed, the toolbox is not being used. And this could be, you might look to do this if it's just you using the toolbox, that's great. Simple copy and paste while SOLIDWORKS is closed can do it. Just take a quick backup every now and then, especially if you're making customizations to whether it's custom sizes of a particular fastener, bearings, bolts, whatever it is within Toolbox. I do recommend every now and then taking a timely backup. Now, if you're already doing server backups, if you've located your shared toolbox on a server, that's fine. It's already happening, hopefully. But even then, ensure that backups are actually happening, because I've seen a lot of cases where people say, yeah, our server's backed up, and then they find out that that particular directory has not been backed up in like several months. So maybe as it is spring, do some spring cleaning, some spring verification, and check that whatever it's named, whatever that toolbox folder is named, wherever it is, that it does have a timely backup available. And then I mentioned the concept of admin images, whereby essentially you're customizing the software that is installed on each PC in your network that it has SOLIDWORKS software installed, which products they have, when the software is deployed, and so forth. But you can also, with that settings file I mentioned, actually have it deploy a specific SLDREG file to specific machines, which is really nice. Because once again, in terms of company practices for templates, custom sheet formats, right, with their title blocks and all those properties, as well as like just managing license distribution. This can be a very convenient way, especially if you are an admin type or you've been designated that role at your company, to be able to kind of just control it, right? And you control when updates occur, which is nice. Kind of make sure everyone kind of stays on the same, at least, or maybe especially, same major version of SOLIDWORKS. So you can see it's not just CAD; it's also inclusive of PDM, SOLIDWORKS Electrical, which I know a lot of you have. So it's inclusive of kind of the entire portfolio there. So a lot of neat options. Definitely check out creating potentially an admin image, and if it might be a fit for your workplace within your workspaces. All right, man, that was a lot, huh? That was quite the deep dive there. Thank you all for jumping on. 1 minute and 40 seconds, or 1 hour and 40 minutes there. That was quite a lot. So once again, thank you all for jumping on. If you like what you saw, if you wouldn't mind, please share a like, as well as subscribe, because this is the first of 10 different deep dives we're going to do this year within SOLIDWORKS, different passion areas. I hope you got something out of this episode, maybe something to take home, take back to the office and explore a bit more, to swim up to, if you will. But yeah, once again, thank you so much, everyone, for jumping on, and we will see you soon. Take care.